this sense of losing the personal self there and the fear that arises. To me, this is when we have falsely, which pretty much everyone has, falsely identified ourselves as the person, the mind-body conglomerate of experience, the sense of separate self. And when we start to experience the dissolving of that, fear comes because there is a belief that as that sense of separate self dissolves, I will die. Because the I that I believe myself to be is the false I. That sense of mind body, that belief that that's who and what I am fundamentally. But what I feel you're touching on there is your true nature. Your true nature is that which is prior to that sense of me and I. But the fear comes from that person, that personal view, that false sense of who and what you are. So if you can sort of sink into and open up to that fear, recognize that where that comes from the ego, the sense of small self, losing its grip in the seat of I am that, sinking into your true I, the ground of being, awareness, consciousness, whatever word we want to use here. To me, to embrace that fear, to find the tenderness towards that fear, is to transcend it but include it. So when we're no longer scrambling back up to that false sense of I that's there, instead we're sinking into the depths of who and what we truly are. But we have to meet that fear often. So that's the first thing I just wanted to comment on, is that you are touching on the reality of the temporary self dissolving. But the beauty of it is that temporary self, that mind body, it comes and goes. The sense of it can feel more solid, less solid. Yet there is still that spark of aliveness shining throughout. Who and what you truly are cannot be lost. If there is fear of losing yourself, that's a self that can be lost and therefore not the true self. Your true self cannot be lost because it is what you are, who you are. Your thoughts can come and go, your body changes, all of this changes, but there is a spark of light, aliveness at the root, at the ground, at the bedrock of this experience, always. So this is what I would just say to that, is to soften towards that fear that is arising, to understand why it is arising, but to soften down, sink down into that sense that you're being drawn into in your practice. And this might help with the actual question that you had as to your practice. Firstly, I would say just a little side note there. Falling asleep happens. To trust the body is taking what it needs. Now, obviously, we sit and we want to go, okay, this is my time, this is my sandbox for meditation, for my practice. So we have that intention. But ultimately, we have to let go of all, once we set that intention, we have to let go of all outcomes. Sometimes sleep happens. So that's the first thing I want to say, is to find some compassion, some warmth in your heart for the body that falls asleep. This can happen. Secondly, practice is not about striving or effort for me. It's about earnestness and diligence, persistence. a return, a notice and a return. It's not about effort. If we approach practice with an effort-filled mind, we have this sense of outcome in mind. I need to get here. I need to do that. I want this. And actually, if you can approach your practice with an attitude of less doing and more being. So being with what's arising, returning to that sense of awareness, the ground of being, these kinds of things. What you might find is that it's much more enjoyable. There's a sort of orientation towards the charm of being with oneself. So practice becomes less of a chore, less of a, I've got to do this, but more of a falling in love with the self, falling in love with being itself. When we have this kind of relationship with meditation, I feel, this is where it becomes a joyous thing, a joyful thing. We have to, as I said before, we have to release our outcomes. Be in the innocence of what we sit here to do today. To surrender to that. If sleeping happens, okay. If thoughts happen, okay. That moment of that aha, of noticing, oh, I'm caught in thoughts, or, oh, I've been sleeping. That is the opportunity of that return. Not a moment sooner. That's what's so beautiful about life, is we sit there and we think, oh, I should have done it better. I should have done it differently. But life has a perfection about it. To see that. To see that, we see, could not be another way. Okay, so I fell asleep. Okay, I was lost in thought. Now I'm not. And there's some gratitude there. Where I was lost, I am found. I'm sure that's a quote from somewhere, but that's what just came. So find yourself again and again. Let your meditation practice be that. An opportunity to find yourself again and again. Each moment an opportunity, each breath, each thought. That's a radical proposition, isn't it? All the areas where we think we're failing in meditation, instead to see as an opportunity to come back to the self, to know God, to know the divine, to know the ground.